Hello everybody and welcome to module number 0. In this module, we are going to be learning a little bit about 3D. Yay! We are going to learn how to add depth to our shapes. Now, normally, we have something along the lines of a circle. And one of the biggest things that happens whenever we are learning how to draw is that we have to learn how to give volume to our drawings. In order to progress and be able to get better at it, we need to learn how to give volume to our shapes. Now, this can be done in a couple different ways. And I'm going to demonstrate to you guys the ways that you guys can use to create depth. Now, let's say that we have this circle and we want to give it shape. We want to give it volume. So in order to do that, there's a couple different ways that you can approach it. First approach is giving it shadows. Give our shape shadows. Giving our shape shadows comes from understanding light. Light sources, right? This is one definite way that you can create volume. What are other ways that you guys can create, that we can create shadows? The other way that you can create depth within your shape is by subdividing your shape. Now, something that is very, very important when you're doing these sort of exercises, when you're subdividing them, is that you don't just go in and split it up and down, left and right. You have to keep in mind the fact that the lines go around your shape, right? So whenever we are drawing them, you need to remember that these lines are going around your shape. And you have a front and a back to each one of these lines. Now, this is going to be crucial when it comes down to understanding a lot of what we are going to be talking about in these modules, in these new classes that you're going to embark on. So I want you to learn little by little to be able to see the surface area of elements such as spheres and start seeing them from a front and a back view, and also learning how to, by doing that same thing, you can learn to subdivide your shapes and create fractions of them or slices of them. Practice doing that at different stages. And just get used to drawing the front and the back of elements. The reason that you need to learn how to do this is because it's going to facilitate a lot of things down the line. It's going to allow you to draw complex shapes, such as a beanbag, and you're going to be able to determine the width of your elements and your shapes and create a visualization of a front and the back of your elements, allowing you a lot more liberty when it comes down to posing and creating elements that are going to be very well established. Now, I'm going to give you guys an example of what we are going to go through. And this is essentially the roadmap of what we are going to be talking about. We go through this in, I believe, one of the Voyager modules, but this is what I want you guys to keep in mind. This module is going to be meant to show you exercises that are going to help you visualize these things like this a little bit easier. And I'm going to give you guys examples and exercises that you guys can do in order to be able to create more shape-defined features with a three-dimensional look, and remembering that everything goes around. All your lines, all your 3D space revolves around understanding a little bit of perspective, but not perspective like a perspective grid. Right? We're not thinking necessarily practicing our perspective grid perspective. What we're trying to focus on a little bit more is just understanding how shapes are formed, regardless of how we start our shape. And understanding how to divide these things in half and figuring out little areas in them so that you can later on go in and map out things within them, and you'll know where everything lands. That is the main reason that we learn how to use perspective in character design. If you are going to be using this example, for example, this little bear, I started off with a little beanbag because it gives us a lot of depth. And then I went ahead in drawing front and back, or keeping it in mind, I went ahead and subdivided it to be able to find those basic lines that I'm going to need to be able to map out my character a little bit better. Once I find these shapes and I understand the curvatures of the lines, then I can go in and start using these as little grids. In order to start building my character, remembering that everything that I do is a basic shape and it's going to have a little bit of depth. At this point, I can start adding elements if I understand where they're supposed to be coming out from. And also remembering that these are also 3D shapes. So as you can see, the constant of having your basic shapes turn into something that you're going to be using is pretty prevalent when it comes down to designing characters like this. And as you go on, you just clean it up, eventually remove the lines underneath or erase them, and you end up with something akin of a really cool character that you can use for any sort of marketing or device of the sort. So now let's give you guys some exercises in order to be able to understand these things a little bit better. The first exercise that you can do is start drawing a page full of circles. Different sizes, different dimensions. Just get used to drawing circular shapes of different sizes, proportions, and see which ones are causing you trouble. If little ones are easier than the bigger ones, and the cleaner they are, the better. But you don't have to be perfect as well. Try to fill up the whole page. Once you have this part, then try to figure out, imagine that you're putting an elastic band over each one of these. And you're going to start learning how to touch both edges and creating little subdivisions. These will eventually, one of the sides will get removed, and then you will be able to see your shape a little bit better. When you're going to practice doing this over and over and over until it becomes second nature to you. This is going to be one of those exercises that you need to be self-critical about. And this is going to be a foundational skill that is going to help you in all of your character design. Regardless if you've been doing this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, it's always good to be able to learn how to visualize things like this. Even if you already have a perfected style and you guys are already experts at what you already do. Try changing it up a little bit. Right? As long as you're touching the edges, just get used to being able to place that in any way, shape, or form. This is just a very, very good skill to have, because this skill set turns into drawing eyes. It turns into a lot of different things, right? Eyelids are just elements like that. Eyes are elements like this that can be turned into everything. And then eventually, once you master the spheres, you gotta move on to different shapes. So move on to cubes. Start drawing cubes in all ways, shapes, and forms. And you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to try to find the surface area of it, and you're going to practice this over and over until it becomes second nature, and you're able to trace things through your shape a little bit easier. This is going to be a skill that's going to be very necessary, not necessarily for this course to master it, but it's going to be necessary if you want to be a character designer, if you're going to want to be in comics or anything like that. This skill is absolutely necessary. Well, let me explain to you why. Imagine that you wanted to give this character, let's just give him a face, and we want to give this little character ears. In order to find that, we would need to know exactly what part of our head our ears are going to be. Let's say we just draw our ears right here. Okay, so now we know that this little area right here is your ear line. Well, if we trace it to the other side, and we keep our perspective in mind, it's not too hard to figure out that it comes out from right there. And then as you progress with your drawing, and you add all the little details that you want to give, you end up with a drawing that's a little bit more refined, and you end up with better anatomy, or better character design. Same thing with hats, same thing with diadems, or anything that really goes on the hat. If you're trying to find the other side of the ear, it's as easy as figuring out where the other ear is and seeing if that would actually show from your side. Now, if animals, it's normally from the top. So we got to figure out how those work. So this skill is going to translate to that. Now, you're going to want to do this with all the different types of shapes and get used to doing this over and over whenever you have time and whenever you have just a chance to actually sit down and practice. You can eventually start combining these shapes and seeing what comes out from them. Once you get decent at it, you're going to start seeing how this eventually starts turning into things like feet, right? Cones like this end up being tails of all sorts. Right? Those are more cones that are like subjected to a shape difference. And then when it comes down to bodies, you're going to want to focus a lot more on just basic shapes like the beanbag, so that you can start building your characters from there. using all the things that you're going to learn in the next couple modules, by the end of this, you're going to be able to come up with some pretty awesome characters without losing any dynamic sense to them just because they're simple and they're cute. As well as they will look awesome because you will be basing all of them off of references, and therefore creating really, really cool illustrations that will be able to be used down the line. Let's just try. And we'll make them into elements like this are very, very good to know, especially if you're going to humanize your animals, because it allows you a chance to be able to play with posing without really needing to understand a bunch of animal anatomy. But combine this with a little bit of reference, and you'll end up getting some pretty cool animal drawings. That, you can later clean up, and I'll show you guys how to clean up, how to save your work, and how to actually move forward with learning with references and actually taking on an entire project that will show you guys how to actually deal with a client and give you guys a little bit of practice as well. But this is going to be it for this little module. I just wanted to give you guys some examples, some exercises, and some ways to start learning how to visualize these things so that you can eventually be able to create awesome things like these. Going from something from scratch all the way to something that is awesome and really, really cute in this case scenario. Thank you guys so much. I think that after you guys practice these little things, you guys will be ready to start module number 1. And once you guys are, feel free to tackle it. You do not need any digital programs. You can just go at it with your sketchbook. So let's get to it. Grab some coffee, get your stuff, and let's go.